I've always covered my parents' bills. For my father's birthday, I bought him a Rolex watch. He looked at me coldly and said, "Respect can't be bought with money. You're worthless." Calmly, I stood up and walked away. Now they have nothing and are desperately calling me because they no longer have a son. My name is Wilder, and I'm known as the king of toilet paper. Yes, you heard that right. I don't run a tech company, sell luxury cars, or build skyscrapers. My fortune comes from something much simpler. Factories that churn out tons of toilet paper every month. From basic models that feel like sandpaper to premium triple-ply versions, my production skyrocketed during the pandemic when many were facing financial crises. I doubled my income during that time, but to my parents, none of it ever seemed to matter. Back in college, my dad used to joke sarcastically whenever someone asked what I did for a living. He'd say, "My son is a great entrepreneur. Every day, thousands of people think about him while they're on the toilet." My mom would laugh, just like my older brother Mark, who worked at a bank and struggled to pay his own bills. Even he teased me. "Wilder, admit it, you're rich because you rule the world's bathrooms." Everyone found it funny, but when they needed money, the jokes were quickly forgotten. When my parents couldn't pay their mortgage, I covered the debt. When my mom wanted to renovate the house, I paid for everything. When Mark had financial troubles, I helped him out. I never refused them anything, but every time they talked about my work, it was always with that condescending tone, as if my money was worth less because it came from something they considered insignificant. I still remember buying the Rolex for my dad, an elegant gold watch that had been his ultimate dream. As he opened the box, he was surprised. "What's this?" he asked. I explained it was a gift. "This must have cost a fortune. Where did you get so much money?" "Oh, of course, thanks to toilet paper," he muttered with an ironic smile. I took a deep breath and said, "If you don't like it, I can return it." He glanced at the watch for a few seconds before putting it on his wrist. "Well, since you already bought it," he accepted as usual. They took my money, but never my respect. A year later, we were at a fancy restaurant celebrating my dad's 60th birthday. I paid for everything: the venue, dinner, wine, live music. Nothing was cheap. It was all first class. My parents were surrounded by friends and family, laughing and enjoying the evening. Then came the toast. My dad stood up, raised his glass, and began speaking loudly so everyone could hear. "I want to make a special toast to my son Wilder, who thinks throwing money at us will earn our respect." The room erupted in laughter. I felt a knot in my stomach. "Excuse me, what did you say?" I asked, thinking I'd misheard. He sipped his wine and patted me on the back. "Don't be upset, son. It's just a joke." Mark laughed too. "Yeah, man, don't be so sensitive." My mom chimed in. "You know how your dad is. He loves joking around." I looked around the table. Everyone was laughing, completely oblivious to the weight of those words. I had given them everything. I paid for the house, the luxuries, the parties, the dinners, and yet to them, I was just a punchline. I set my glass down on the table and stood up. "If my money means nothing to you, then I guess you won't need it anymore." A heavy silence fell over the table. "What do you mean?" my mom asked, forcing a smile. I grabbed my jacket and looked directly at my dad. "It means that from now on, you'll pay your own bills. You won't get another penny from me." Mark tried to downplay it. "Come on, don't be dramatic." But this wasn't drama, it was reality. "If my money doesn't bring me any respect, it won't buy your comfort either." My dad slammed his glass on the table. "So you're just going to abandon us over a joke?" I stared at him. "Dad, you abandoned me a long time ago when you decided my success didn't matter." With that, I left the restaurant, got into my car, and sat in silence. I expected to feel anger, sadness, or disappointment. But to my surprise, I felt relief. For the first time in years, I didn't have to save anyone, worry about bills that weren't mine, fix family problems, or listen to laughter while they took my money without hesitation. That night, I slept better than I had in years. In the days that followed, the silence was deafening. No one called, no one texted. It was as if my family hadn't even noticed I was gone. Before we continue, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're from. I'm really happy to find out. And now, let's get to the video. But then, the problems began. First, a message arrived a week later. It was from my mom. "Hannah, sweetheart, did you forget to send the transfer this month?" I ignored it. A few hours later, another one came. "Hannah, Wilder, darling, we're a bit short on cash this month. If you could send some money quickly, it would really help us out." I smirked sarcastically. Of course they were out of money. They always depended on me to fix everything. 2 days passed, and my mom didn't push further. But then my brother Mark stepped in. He called me saying, "Mom's worried. She said you're not responding. What's going on with you?" I didn't answer right away. "Mark, stop acting like I'm being unreasonable. It's not that serious," I shot back. That's when I couldn't hold back anymore. "I'm not upset. I've just decided I won't be supporting you financially anymore." "What? Are you joking? You think this is funny?" he replied, incredulous. There was a long pause before he continued. "You're insane. You're going to let our parents struggle just because you're mad about a toast?" I responded firmly. "No, Mark. They need to learn how to take care of themselves like responsible adults." He didn't say anything else. That night. 2 weeks later, my parents started feeling the weight of my absence. My mom's car payment was delayed, the gas bill went unpaid, and the bank called about the mortgage. So, my mom did what she always did. She tried to guilt trip me. She called while I was at the office. "Wilder, my son, please, we need to talk," I sighed. "What is it, Mom?" "I don't know what's gotten into you, but it's been long enough. I miss you, my love. Why don't you come over for dinner on Saturday?" Replied. "No, Mom, I'm not coming." Her voice softened, almost pleading. "Let me forget what happened, okay? Come home. Let's have dinner together." I knew exactly what she was doing. She was trying to make me feel guilty so I'd lower my guard. But this wasn't about dinner or the past. It was about how they'd used me for years. "I won't fall for that," I answered. There was silence. Then her tone shifted. "Wilder, how can you say we're your family?" I shot back. "Yes, but to you, I'm just an ATM. And even ATMs run out of cash eventually." I hung up, knowing this was only the beginning. I knew they wouldn't give up easily. People accustomed to getting everything without effort don't quit without a fight. 2 days later, the next wave hit. My mom started flooding my phone. "Hannah, my son, I don't know what's wrong with you, but you're making a mistake you won't be able to fix. We raised you with so much love, and now you're just abandoning us like this?" Another message followed. "Hannah, your dad doesn't want to talk about it, but he's hurting deeply." Then another. "Hannah, I can't believe you just stopped paying the bills without warning. How are we supposed to survive?" And yet another. "Hannah, do you really want us to end up on the street?" Even dramatic messages appeared. "Hannah, Wilder, my dear, doesn't this hurt you? We're sitting in the dark because the electricity got cut off." I ignored every single message. I wasn't falling into that emotional trap again. But then, they started involving my friends. One of them called me saying, "Wilder, your mom sent me a message saying she's worried. She said you're not responding and the family is in trouble." I chuckled inwardly. Trouble? Interesting. They never had any issues while spending my money. "Listen, I don't want to get involved, but maybe you could help them out a little. After all, they're your parents," he suggested. I hung up immediately. I wasn't going to listen to these absurdities anymore. And then, they did what I hated most. They tried to use family against me. An aunt named Scarlett called. "Wilder, what's going on? Your parents are desperate." She kept going. "Aunt Scarlett sees everything they've done for you." And again. "Aunt Scarlett, my boy, they're old. Don't be ungrateful." Another message said, "Your mom told me they don't even have internet now. How will they find jobs if they can't even send resumes?" I finally blocked her number. I knew she didn't care about my parents. She just loved drama. But the worst was yet to come. Later, as I was heading home from work, I saw an unknown number calling. Normally, I wouldn't have answered. but something made me pick up this time. "Hello?" It was Mark, and he sounded furious. "What do you want?" "I want to know when you became such a heartless, selfish person." I smirked sarcastically. "Ah, so now I'm the selfish one? What else am I?" He exploded. "Mom and Dad are on the verge of collapse, all because you decided to throw a tantrum," I shot back. "This isn't a tantrum, it's a boundary. Do you think I'm incredibly ungrateful for refusing to be the family ATM? Did I leave them in this situation without warning? Is that it?" I laughed in disbelief. "Prepare them, Mark? They're adults. Why should I prepare them to pay their own bills? They've never had to do it before. You took advantage of my kindness and then just left me behind." I rubbed my face in disbelief at the absurdity of what I was hearing. "So, according to you, this is my fault? They chose to depend on me. How do you expect them to learn to live without my help when I've been giving everything for years?" Mark replied, tense. "Well, I guess they'll have to figure it out quickly." There was a heavy silence before he dropped the one line that would change everything. "If Dad ends up in the hospital, because of the stress you're causing, it'll be on you." I burst out laughing. They had finally exhausted their strategies and were playing their last guilt card. "If Dad ends up in the hospital, Mark, it'll be because he never learned how to manage his own life." I hung up. I knew this wasn't over yet. They wouldn't give up so easily. They had moved from emotional blackmail to outright manipulation, and now they only had one option left: public humiliation. Exactly a week after Mark's last call, it happened. I was at Central Perk Cafe with some coworkers when my phone started buzzing incessantly with notifications. Messages from friends began pouring in. "Dude, what's going on with your family?" An old college buddy texted, "Wilder, did you really abandon your parents?" Even a business partner reached out. "I saw a post about you on Facebook. Call me as soon as possible." I frowned and opened social media. And there it was, a public post made by my mom. It said something like, "It's heartbreaking when a son forgets his family. We gave him everything, and now he repays us by leaving us in poverty. We don't know how we'll pay the rent this month, and the bank is already threatening to seize our home. We never imagined our own child would turn his back on us like this. We're simply asking for a little help. If anyone knows of a job for two elderly people who have worked their whole lives, please help us. God bless you." The post had hundreds of shares and comments. "What a shame. How can a child be so heartless? And he claims to be successful? Disgraceful. Does anyone know who this guy is? I want to make sure I never buy anything from his company." My name wasn't mentioned directly, but everyone knew exactly who they were talking about. I took a deep breath and laughed. Did they really think this would work? "Okay," one of my coworkers said. "Your parents are putting on their little show online?" I calmly finished my coffee and headed home. I knew within hours I'd get a call from Mark, and, as expected, my phone rang. "What's wrong with you? You made Mom cry in front of strangers online?" "This has nothing to do with me," I replied. "They're the ones who decided to air our dirty laundry on social media. But would it really be so hard to keep helping? Look at them. Aren't you ashamed? I'd be embarrassed to be an adult who's never worked a day in their life and is now begging on Facebook." Mark tried to argue. "I didn't expect this from you." I responded firmly. "And I didn't expect you to be a freeloader, but at least I'm cutting the problem off now." He shot back. "Dad said that if you don't fix this, he'll sue you." That made me laugh out loud. "Sue me for not paying their bills? Good luck with that, Mark." I stopped responding. I knew he realized I was right. But then my mom called. Her voice sounded fragile, almost as if she'd been crying. "What do you want, Mom?" She sighed deeply. "We didn't want to do this. We just want things to go back to how they were." I smirked sarcastically. "Unfortunately, no, Mom. Do you want me to start paying for everything again, while you continue to see me as a failure? Isn't that true?" "Yes, it's true," she admitted. "If you were a doctor, lawyer, or engineer, we'd be proud of you. But since you sell toilet paper, it's just a joke to us." She fell silent. She knew I was right. "Mom, do you know what's the most ironic part? You've never forgiven me for my business, but you had no problem. using my money all these years. She started crying. My son, please. I interrupted her. No, Mom. It's over. Not anymore. I hung up. I knew this meant the war was nearing its end, but one final blow was still missing. After that last call, I waited for more attempts at manipulation. I figured they'd push harder, trying to make me change my mind. But all I received was silence. No messages, no calls, no passive-aggressive posts on social media. At first, I thought they had learned their lesson, that they had finally accepted their lives weren't dependent on me. But I was wrong. 2 months later, I received a letter from the bank. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I had no debts. All my bills were in order. But when I opened the envelope, its contents sent chills down my spine. It was a formal notification informing me that my parents had tried to use my name to refinance their mortgage. Not only had they put my name on the debt, but they had also forged my signature. I grabbed my phone and called my mom immediately. She answered with a trembling voice. Wilder, I knew you'd call. I responded bluntly. So, you really thought you could steal from me and get away with it? That wasn't a mistake. It was theft. She tried to justify herself. It wasn't theft. It was just a misstep. We plan to pay it all back. I interrupted, incredulous. With what money, Mom? You have no income, and Dad can barely cover his own expenses. Or were you hoping I'd clean up this mess too? She hesitated before replying. We had no other choice. I shot back firmly. You did have a choice. You could have sold the house and moved somewhere more affordable. But instead, you chose to deceive me. She started sobbing. Your father didn't want to do this. It was my idea. I cut her off again. It doesn't matter whose idea it was. You're both responsible. If I press charges, you'll face legal consequences. Your house will be seized, your reputation destroyed. It's not my fault, I continued. You put yourselves in this situation. Mom, you're no longer my problem. Not ever again. She begged. Wilder, please. We're your family. I took a deep breath and said, No. You're just two people who tried to take advantage of me. I hung up. The next day, I went straight to the bank. I explained the entire situation and provided evidence that I had nothing to do with the fraudulent mortgage. A few weeks later, my parents were officially notified that their house would be auctioned off. They tried to stop the process, but there was nothing they could do. Eventually, they were forced to move into a small apartment. No luxury, no comfort. Of course, it didn't take long for Mark to show up. One day, I found my brother waiting outside my office. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled clothes, an expression of total despair. We need to talk, he said. There's nothing to discuss, Wilder. Please. Dad is devastated and Mom is sick. She can't live like this. I replied coldly. It's not my fault. They never learned how to earn a living on their own. But you have money, he insisted. It wouldn't cost you anything to help them. I smirked sarcastically. Exactly. It wouldn't cost me a thing, and that's why I'm not going to do it. Mark glared at me with pure anger. You only think about yourself. For years you took advantage of us. I calmly retorted. At least I know how to live without depending on anyone. I turned around and walked into the office. I knew it would be the last time I saw him. 6 months passed. During that time, my business continued to thrive. I traveled, enjoyed life, and focused on what truly mattered. One day, while checking my emails, I saw a message from an unknown number. I hope you're doing well, Mom. I read it, thought for a moment, and then deleted the message without responding. For the first time in my life, I felt completely free. But the story wasn't over yet. A month later, during a meeting with business partners, one of them looked at me curiously. Wilder, what happened with your family? I raised my glass and replied, Why do you ask? He pulled out his phone and slid the screen toward me, showing a social media post. My parents had tried again, this time without mentioning my name. The story now was that a successful entrepreneur had abandoned them, leaving them destitute. Ridiculous. They were perfectly capable of working, but chose to keep playing the victim. I took a deep breath and smiled. It's not something I need to worry about. They're learning to live without me, in their own way. I didn't look at the post for more than a second. I simply didn't care. I was finally free. After everything that happened, I decided to share my story on Reddit. Not because I needed validation, but because I wanted to lay it all out. Writing about it helped me see things clearly. But what I didn't expect was the massive reaction I received. Thousands of comments poured in, divided between support and criticism. Some called me brave, others labeled me a heartless monster. As I read through the comments, I noticed many people asking the same question. How could you do this to your own parents? At first I laughed. It was ironic because the real question should have been, how could they do this to me? How could they mock me for years while spending my money without hesitation? How could they forge my signature to saddle me with debt? How could they resort to manipulation, public humiliation, and guilt trips just to keep relying on me? Of course, to the world, a son is always supposed to help his parents, no matter how toxic they are. Another comment read, "You could have given them some money and avoided all this drama." Yes, sure. Because giving in once would have meant they'd never exploit me again. That's exactly what I did for years. I gave and gave and gave, thinking that one day they'd see me as more than just a source of income. But that day never came. Because when people realize they can exploit you without consequences, they never stop. Some also said, "Your parents are elderly and can't easily find jobs. You left them homeless." Lies. My parents weren't disabled or ill. They simply never tried to do anything on their own because I was always there to bail them out. And when I finally forced them to face reality, they found a way to survive. Because they always could. But the comment that struck me most was simple. Do you regret it? I didn't answer right away. I stared at the screen, thinking for a moment. Then, with absolute certainty, I typed my response. No. I only regret not doing it sooner. After everything that happened, I learned something important. Nobody values what's given too easily. I spent years helping my parents, paying their bills, solving their problems, thinking it would make them respect me more. But that's not what happened. They only saw my money, not my efforts. They treated me like a problem-solving machine, never as someone with dreams, limits, and feelings. I wanted to be the hero of the family, but I became the villain in their story. It taught me that sometimes, helping too much can do more harm than good. When you always give, people start to expect it. They don't learn to fend for themselves, and you become trapped in that dynamic. In my case, my parents never had to face their own struggles because I was always there to fix everything. And when I stopped, they felt lost, but still tried to blame me for it. If I could give one piece of advice, it would be this. Don't be afraid to say no. Helping is good, but boundaries are essential. If someone depends on you so much that they forget to value what you do, it might be time to step back. It's not selfish to take care of yourself. In fact, it's necessary. You can't save everyone, and trying to do so will only leave you exhausted and frustrated. Do you agree with the protagonist's decision to cut financial support to his family, knowing it would put them in difficulty? Or do you think he should have continued helping, even if it meant perpetuating a cycle of dependency and disrespect? Your opinion matters to all of us, and the next video will surprise you. See you there.